Tonight on the fifth chapter, the surprising 500 Tigers are off until Friday due to a viral outbreak in the Cardinals organization. It's the second outbreak in a season that's less than 2 weeks old. Is it time for Fith to cancel the season? Pac-12 athletes are threatening to opt out of the 2020 season en masse unless their demands are met. Demands like a 50-50 split of revenue. Which side will blink? And Lions quarterback Stafford tests positive for COVID-19, but it was a false positive. How will this affect the Lions in the upcoming NFL season? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube and Facebook Live. This is the fifth chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these stews. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the fifth chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. Thank you guys for joining us. We're into August as we get ready for episode number 25, Dennis.
Yeah, it's good to be here. 25, man. I can't wait for 50, 75, and 100.
100. That's going to be, doing quick math, 37 weeks from now. 37 weeks from now. And we want to thank certainly everybody out there who's allowed us to get to our 13th week. Without your support, we would not be doing this. Before we get to our 5 fantastic chapters, we want to thank everyone who is watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, and also those who are listening to the podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Of course, that is available before midnight on the day of our shows. Make sure that you also like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending your feedback in via the live stream on Facebook Live, which is down there, or on YouTube on the side. Let's now take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, we've got Pac-12 players threatening to opt out of the 2020 season, saying, "We are united." Hashtag "We are united." In the third chapter, you got a star Big Ten wide receiver, Rashod Bateman, electing to opt out of the 2020 season. We'll share why he's deciding to do that and what kind of impact that will have on the sport. In the fourth chapter, Stafford tested positive for coronavirus, then tested negative 3 times. Why did that happen? We'll tell you about that. And in the fifth chapter, it is Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. Dennis, before we get to the first chapter, we do have some sad news. It's not really news. It's not breaking or anything like that, but it's obviously been a tough weekend for a lot of us in Metro Detroit, particularly those of us in sports media, because our colleague Jamie Samuelson died on Saturday at the age of 48. Just last week, when we came on the air on Tuesday, we talked about how it was just the day before, on Monday, that he announced to the world that he had been dealing with cancer for 19 months. He'd been fighting it for 19 months. When he was diagnosed in January of 2019, it was stage 4, and he lasted a fairly long time, but certainly at age 48, a very young age to succumb to colon cancer, when doctors don't even recommend that people get a colonoscopy until the age of 50. Many of you guys remember us talking about that last week, asking you to pray for him. We certainly hope that you will continue to pray for his family. But we definitely wanted to share a few words about Jamie before we get to our first chapter.
Yeah, I would say that, I've known Jamie even before he started working at the Ticket, following him when he started at DFN. Or I can remember a show that he started, I believe, in its inception, he was there at DFN. He would do some updates. And then he had his own show in the midday. It was called the Mid-Afternoon Sports Page. Then he started doing I think 10 to 2 show. I listened to that one. And it seemed like I knew him before he started at the Ticket, because when he started, it seemed like we were already friends. And then for a couple of years, we did the Lions postgame together. And what happened there is, at home games, we would get to the stadium. He was doing TV. I would get there a couple hours early, and our seats were right next to each other. So we would And what I found out, a lot of people come over and see Jamie during the game. It's like, wow, a lot more people stopping by, like Wojo and just other people in the media stopping by, always saying hey and talking about the game. But you sit next to, somebody and watch the Lions for a couple of years, then do the post game. What I remember the most is, we would be there all the way to the end. The stadium's completely emptied out. And
His sense of wit was on display during that show. Just the fact that they were bringing that up and they were getting so much reaction to such an interesting topic, I thought was brilliant. And then the third thing was it was a year or two ago, he said that, hey, yeah, my son Josh was listening to your show. And, I'm thinking, why the heck you letting your son listen to Brian Chapman on the radio? He said, yeah, my son was listening to your show on Sunday night, and he said that you called Nick Castellanos the worst defensive outfielder in baseball. And he said, Dad, is that true? Is Nick Castellanos really the worst defensive player in baseball? And I was just shocked that he let his kid listen to me, but he said that that's just his evening routine. As he gets ready to go to sleep, he listens to sports talk radio for an hour or so, and he thought it was appropriate, or he okayed his son listening to me. But I have a prediction based on how much his son Josh loved listening to the radio. I heard yesterday that Jeff Rieger said that his favorite radio personality was actually Rieger. I predict that Josh Samuelson will follow in his dad's footsteps and be a sports talk show host.
Well, I know the kid likes basketball. He was at the office a few times. He'd always be running around, dribble the ball in the hallway, and shooting hoops against the wall. So he might have been in trouble why he had to go with his dad there. I never knew that. But, yeah, he had a pretty good handle. I always saw him out there. I predict he'll be a basketball player as well.
Okay. Well, and definitely if you have any thoughts on the passing of Jamie Samuelson, please send those in via Facebook Live or YouTube. Now let's get to the first chapter, and that takes us to baseball. And I would like to give you an update on the Tigers game, but we don't have one today because their entire 4-game series with the Cardinals has been postponed. I honestly think it's going to be canceled. I don't know how you make up 4 games when you're only supposed to have 6 off days during this 66-day stretch. The Tigers are not going to play again until Friday unless there's another outbreak. The reason is because the Cardinals, not the Tigers, have a big outbreak. 13 cases, including 7 players. The Cardinals have only played 3 games this season. The Marlins, coming into today, had only played 3 games this season because of their outbreak. The Phillies had their series last week against the Marlins canceled. The Yankees have been affected as well. Meanwhile, some teams have already played 11 games heading into today. Dennis, what do you think about all these outbreaks, how they're affecting the baseball season, and do you think that we're possibly on the brink of them just canceling the season?
Yeah, it felt like a tipping point when the Marlins had their big outbreak, and then it felt like more of a tipping point when it happened with the Cardinals. It'll be amazing if they're able to, get to September. The way things are going here, sometimes it feels like it'll be amazing if the Tigers ever play another game. So I don't know. It seems like, the Cardinals were out, throwing the dice, gambling. That's a no-no when you're out of a bubble. And it seems like the Marlins, even though Derek Jeter said they were just going out for milk or going out for coffee or whatever he was saying.
Or milk.
Well, you know what? In the past, you feel like, players like whatever, breaking curfew or something, it would be out till like 4 a.m. and, they'd be wasted. And, you'd have to get in trouble with the cops, then it's like, hey, man, you're always going to have a couple guys, whatever team you're on, there's always going to be a couple jokers. And even during a pandemic, it's going to be like that. So they're using them as examples and everything else. But, yeah, it's going to be surprising if they're going to be able to get to next week and certainly get to September. And, I was enjoying it. I was enjoying some Tiger baseball while it lasted, even these first 7-inning games that were ever played. Even though I had to wait.
I wasn't enjoying 7 innings. I don't like Manfred ball.
Well, I was looking forward to Saturday's game and waiting around. It got washed out. And then I'm getting ready for Sunday and it's washed out again or delayed for 2 hours, but then they played the quick games. Yeah, well, they were what everybody's been talking about. They want a faster pace, quicker game. Those are like 2.5-hour games, those 7-inning games. What's not to like, man? Isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah, I guess it is according to Manfred. But so you're saying that you don't predict they'll be playing in September?
You know what? If you wanted me to make a prediction, no, I don't think they'll be playing in September.
Yeah, I think that they've got. I don't think they can probably withstand another outbreak. They've had 2 in 2 weeks. If we get to a third and a fourth, particularly if it happens in the month of August, I don't know how they can continue to keep on playing baseball when, especially if there's another one that happens in the NL East, where they've already had the Phillies and the Marlins affected. If there's one that happens in the NL Central or even the AL Central, because the Tigers have had their games cut, the Cardinals have had their number of games cut. They've only played 3 games. I just look at this whole situation and I think just how stupid and stubborn are we as a country, because we've got this coronavirus pandemic that's going on from coast to coast. Half the country just wants to work through it, just wants to charge through it, act like it's not that big a deal. 1,000 people are dying per day, and maybe because they don't affect them, they think it's okay. And now it is affecting them, if at least they're a sports fan, because you've got these baseball games getting canceled, series getting canceled. You get a week of games that are canceled. And if you're a sports fan, it absolutely affects you. If you're a Tigers fan, you can watch ESPN, MLB Network, FS1, and all that to get your baseball fix, but not your Tigers fix. I just wonder where we're going to get to the point where we finally decide to shut down the country for 4 to 8 weeks to crush the virus, like we see in other parts of the world, as close as Canada, but also South Korea, New Zealand, most of Europe. I just don't know what it's going to take, whether it's going to be more cases, because we've had more cases, that doesn't affect it. More deaths doesn't seem to affect it. Does it need to be a celebrity? We've already had a former presidential candidate in Herman Cain dying, but maybe he wasn't famous enough. Do we need more games to be canceled? I mean, a week's worth of games for the Cardinals and the Miami Marlins hasn't done it. Do we need seasons to be canceled? Is that what it takes? Do we need schools refusing to be open? I don't know what the wake-up call is going to be. Perhaps it is going to be the wake-up call of the baseball season getting canceled. I just don't know. But I have a feeling that perhaps this could be the last outbreak for maybe a few weeks, and because of that, we'll just keep on trudging through it.
Well, looking at some feedback here already, Paul says if there's no bubble, no sports, they're at risk. Garrick, there on Facebook Live, saying, right, no Big Ten too. We'll get to that coming up in one of these future chapters here on tonight's show there, Garrick. It's good to see you there on Facebook Live. But you know, there's a couple things that baseball does have going for them where they might just go through no matter what happens with this season, cancellations, even if, let's say, the Tigers only end up playing 45 games or something even crazier than that.
What a joke that would be.
Well, that would be a joke, but you know what? I think that the one thing about the winning percentage that they could look at and just trying to get to the postseason. Everybody wants to just see the postseason anyways, and an expanded postseason, and you go on the winning percentage. If you look at the money, the owners are standing to make billions if it gets to a postseason. So they might cancel leagues. They might, cancel the entire American League and National League East for 3 weeks. But if they can just somehow get to the end and one team plays 58, the other team plays 45, they'll have a postseason. You can say it's a joke or not. You can just call it, pandemic baseball. You'll get the postseason. Maybe they'll get the Dodgers. Maybe they'll get the Yankees. Maybe we'll enjoy it. Maybe they'll all get shut down. But that's just where we're at, man. It wouldn't surprise me if they canceled it tomorrow. I don't want that to happen. So if it comes down, hey, do you want to cancel tomorrow, or do you want teams to take 2 weeks off? You want to limp into October with one team playing 40 games and the other team, playing 57 and going on a winning percentage? Will it be a joke? Yeah. It'll be a joke. Remember, You always have a couple jokers like you're talking about. I was saying, like, on a team, there's always a couple guys that aren't going to listen and do something. No, it's like that across the country, and we're not talking just a team of 25. If the whole country is a big team, there's always going to be a few jokers.
Well, and a lot of the jokers are leading various states because they refuse to put in mask orders, they refuse to shut down and things like that. Well, and you know what? Some of these individuals are starting to react. I mean, slowly but surely we've got these mask orders coming in, and maybe sports is what is forcing folks to do this. I'll put up a tweet so that you guys can see it, and it's embarrassing that this is what it took, but this is from the governor of Mississippi. Ashton Pittman, some reporter, I guess put that in. But he said, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves issues statewide mask mandate. Quote, I want to see college football. The best way for that to occur is for all of us to realize that wearing a mask, as irritating as that can be, and I promise I hate it more than anyone watching, is critical. But when asked for his reasoning, he said, I want to see college football. Now, maybe if other people take that same attitude, they'll put on a mask. If there are more sports-centric governors out there who believe that a mask is necessary to have sports, then they will do that. But we're already into the baseball season, into the basketball and hockey seasons, which aren't affected because of the bubble. Football season is less than a month away. Is it too little, too late? I don't know, but at least that's positive progress. It just seems like maybe sports are what it's going to be, what it's going to take to get this action. We saw that back on March 11th. What got everyone to start shutting things down? A sports star, Rudy Gobert, testing positive.
Yeah, and during a normal season, you take 10-game snapshots. Sometimes you take a look at a series, but you can just or a month around the holidays. But 10-game segments. That's what the Tigers have played so far, and that's all we've got to go on. So it's been relatively entertaining to me, even with the 7-game doubleheader loss that they had on Sunday to drop them to 5-5. But yeah, Tyler Alexander striking out 9 guys in a row.
That was cool.
Greg Soto. I don't know if I had to predict with Alexander is going to be some kind of fifth starter or somebody that you can really depend on in the bullpen or something. I wouldn't predict that. I mean, he was great on Sunday. It was a big strike zone. Both games were by both home plate umpires, but I watched him a lot in August and September last year, and he was brutal in a lot of those games. I saw a lot of Soto too, Greg Soto, who's lefty, and he's throwing up to 100 miles an hour, and they've worked on that slide step with him. I always liked him. They had him as a starter, and he would be good. He would throw zeros out there for like an inning or two, but he'd get to like the third or fourth inning, and he would always just run into trouble. And it just looked, hey, this guy's good for 25 to 35 pitches. Put him in the bullpen. I could see him as a future setup guy, maybe even closer. Man, he's got that kind of stuff.
Well, and with this 4-day break, that's going to stunt whatever momentum those two individuals had. And you hope that on Friday, while it may stunt their momentum, the Tigers' bats could somehow recharge. That the Tigers' hitters could have long conversations and long BP sessions with their hitting coach, because they're sitting around here with, they're hitting a bunch of home runs, but they're in the middle of the pack when it comes to slugging. They're striking out over 10 times per game. They got 9 doubles, and if you look at the teams that have played at least 8 games, only the Indians have fewer, and they have a 205 batting average. I mean, I said it last week, I'll say it again. The home runs are keeping them in the game, but they have to eventually start getting on base and stop striking out if they want this to last. And hopefully they can get that figured out in this 4-day break.
Yeah, I think the kind of stuff you talk about, if they got sorted out, like they could compete for the American League Central, and I don't expect that. And like if they could stay at 500 again, I thought that was their ceiling. If this team, and now I don't think they're going to play 60 games, but if they could play 500 baseball, it would keep everybody engaged. Again, I think it's about finding some guys for the future. Maybe a Soto. Jacoby Jones is 28 years old. He had a fantastic first week there, but if you look at his overall numbers, I got a slash line here, 217, 281, 384. As a 28-year-old, once they start serving him up some breaking balls and throwing him that off-speed stuff, his batting average plummets. They'll start taking in those pitcher meetings before the games, they'll start really concentrating on him. It would be nice to see him reverse that. He did show with a different stance and a different approach late last year before he got hurt that maybe he was turning some things around, but he's a very interesting guy to watch. Christian Stewart, another one. But I think with everything going on, just to go back to the lead where we were at, I know a little joke to you for Christian Stewart, but hey, I still hold out hope for him and Jamer Candelario finally got a hit.
Okay.
Okay.
That's enough.
I know, that was funny. But I think the Tigers, Mize would have been up on Sunday.
Yes.
But the Tigers were like, let's not bring him up because maybe we can slow play him for another year.
Well, they can. Well, when you look at the rain, which is a big factor in the game on Sunday, and then you look at the fact that the season could be done in a week or two, and what's the point of having him come up for 2 starts when they could just push him back and say, hey, we'll bring him up at the end of April and we'll have another year. Now, if they can get 7, 8, 9 starts out of him, then it certainly makes sense to bring him up. But to have him waste a year of eligibility for 2 starts when they could just wait until late April of next year, that might be the play right now because of this Rona.
All right, let's get some feedback in here. Live chat. Keith. It's always good to see Keith. I think Keith might be the number 1 Fifth Chapter viewer here. He certainly sends a lot of feedback. It is appreciated. He's a big-time sports fan. He has said that. He is sending his condolences to the Samuelson family and says he knew his sports. He will be missed. But he says, I told you guys I don't think we deserve sports. He sounds like you, chap. Not only the way everything is handled it, but a lot of individuals has handled it as well. And then how about Callie on Facebook Live saying 29 teams should send their best pitchers to throw 10 pitches at Astros players, and the one who gets the best hits is crowned the 2020 World Series champ.
Well, if it's a Tiger starting pitcher, they'll probably miss the batter on all 10 pitches. How about that?
You can put a piñata out there. Like if it really goes bad, put put a doll up there or a piñata and have him throw at him.
All right, let's turn the page.
It might come down to that for Rob Manfred.
Yeah, well,
boy.
Rob Manfred's a joke, but I'm not going to put the blame on him for this because the politicians needed to put him in a better spot for his business to thrive. But because the politicians did not do their job to crush the virus, his business is struggling right now with all these teams having to take games off and having them and forcing them to have to start in late July as opposed to maybe late May.
All right, chap, you mentioned it. We're going to turn the page to chapter number 2, and that takes us to the Pac-12, where over the weekend they put a hashtag. You love those hashtags, United. And the players are uniting, and they are requesting or they are threatening if their requests weren't reached and Pac-12 didn't go and look at their demands, that they were threatening to opt out. What do you think of the strategy of some of these Pac-12 players?
And just so everybody can see what we're talking about, I'll put up on the screen their letter, and they wrote it on the Players Tribune. And it was a fairly lengthy letter. They entitled it hashtag We Are United. And as you can see throughout the article, they end every sentence with end the first half of their article with hashtag We Are United. Like, because NCAA sports exploit college athletes physically, economically, and academically, and also disproportionately harm black college athletes, hashtag We Are United. You go down a little bit further. Because we must have adequate COVID-19 testing to help protect our health. Hashtag We Are United. And I'll throw one more in there. Because we should be included in equitably sharing the revenue our great talents generate, especially in a pandemic. Hashtag We Are United. And you go down, and these are their demands. They have demands for health and safety, for all sports having their teams reinstituted, racial justice, economic freedom, all these different things. And in terms of how serious they are, I highlighted it for you. It says, due to the COVID-19 and other serious concerns, we will opt out of Pac-12 fall camp and game participation unless the following demands are guaranteed in writing by our conference to protect and benefit both scholarship athletes and walk-ons. Surprised to see that they're sticking up for the walk-ons. Look, When I see what they wrote in this article for the Players Tribune, obviously it was well thought out. They put a lot of time into it, and they make a lot of demands. And that certainly that key quote about how unless it's in writing, they're going to opt out. I think that either these Pac-12 players are bluffing or they're just not going to have a season, because a lot of these demands I think are reasonable, but they're not asking the Pac-12 to tinker. They're asking for a Pac-12 revolution. And you also have to consider that the Pac-12 knows that if they fold by succumbing to these demands, like a 50-50 revenue split, which I think is certainly going to be the biggest one, if they succumb to the demands of reinstituting all the sports that universities like Stanford decided to fold, If the Pac-12 folds or caves or whatever you want to call it, then players from other conferences like the Big Ten, ACC, SEC, Big 12, the MAC, whatever, they're going to take action, and their conferences are probably going to have to fold as well. This 50-50 money split, it seems reasonable given that they are the ones that are generating the revenue. But you also have to think about how big of a change that's going to be to the lives of these conferences or the operations of these conferences. Because if you or I lost 50% of our revenue, it'd be significant. It'd be perhaps catastrophic. Now, these schools have lots of money. They reference that Stanford has an endowment of over $27 billion. But I think that would be a monumental change to the way that college sports is viewed. I think that a lot of these things are reasonable, but it's going to be interesting to see just how serious they are and whether or not it's a bluff or they're willing to negotiate and meet somewhere halfway in the middle, 10%, 90%, whatever that's going to be.
Well, I can guarantee you they're not going to get any 50% of that revenue. Like, they'll look at the budget and how that goes along, and they will fold on that particular request. But there's a lot of things in there that the Pac-12, I like how they asked for the commissioner to take a pay cut. That was a good one. But I think there's a lot of things in there that that could be met. And the demands about safety and medical insurance during COVID, I think all of those are really fair points. So I think they could come to an understanding there. A lot of that other stuff, you start looking at a budget and seeing what football pays for, they're not going to get any of that stuff. But, I mean, it doesn't hurt asking, and whether it's a negotiation, however you looked at it as a ploy, I think they'll get some of that stuff. And, it could happen if they end up playing football. But that's good. You know what? I support the players' voices and them getting more compensation. I think that what they get right now is pretty good. It's pretty good, getting school and boarding and getting everything paid for and all of that. But I think they do deserve more compensation, whether it's more years to, get a degree or get graduate degree, or whether it's, finding a way with certainly name, image, and licensing where they can profit off of that. The NCAA doesn't even have to do anything. That's not even about them. They don't have to pay any taxes or anything. They can just let those guys and girls profit off the money. Certainly, and we're talking about mostly football and basketball players. Let them do that. So one thing we know that we talk about this all the time, this is, the compensation. When you see coaches getting $8 million a year and you see the billions of dollars that they're raking in, they get something right now, and it's pretty good, but I think the players deserve more. And I think that, this is just another way in a time to try to force that. And I hope they get it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the coaches' compensation, because one thing that I was thinking about was, if these universities are completely averse to touching their endowments, because a lot of these, especially the Big Ten universities and these Power 5 universities, they've all got billions and billions of dollars in endowments. So if they want to keep their athletic programs going with the same budgets, they can do so extremely easily. But if they don't want to touch that, think about all these big-time college coaches making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year. If all of a sudden they have to start paying these players and there's a 50-50 revenue split, then you could be looking at a situation where the top college coaches are making $1.5 million to $2 million because they have to spend so much money on the players. If they want to cut down on the money that they're using for these facilities so that they could support the Olympic sports or the non-basketball and football sports, then these college coaches are not going to be making as much money. What does that mean? If you got the top college coach making $1 million or $2 million per year, then you're not going to have a Jim Harbaugh going from the NFL to college football. You're not going to have a Ryan Day coaching Ohio State, leading them to a Big Ten championship and sticking around. You're not going to have Nick Saban sticking around. You're going to have those guys have a great season or two and then get an offer from an NFL team and then bolt so they can start making $8 million a year, because while they might love coaching in college, if someone's going to offer them 4 times as much money and they don't have to go around recruiting, then they might think that's a more enticing job. And if they get fired, then they can just become a coordinator or go back to college football for a couple $1 million per year. But college coaching salaries, I think, are going to plummet if this is the case.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. Anybody that uses the feedback or live chat and it's a question about something we talked about earlier, we'll get to all of those before we're done. So I'm reading, Paul, and he had a question about baseball. We'll get to all of those still ahead. So thank you. We're ready to move on to the next chapter?
Let's go to the third chapter. Absolutely. And in the third chapter, that takes us to, well, another college football issue because 2 weeks ago, Joel Ryan released a mock draft for the first round of the 2021 NFL draft for, I believe it was 24/7 Sports. The name and the website doesn't really matter all that much, but in that he had Minnesota star wide receiver Rashod Bateman going number 23 overall to the Green Bay Packers. Bateman obviously has an opportunity to improve his draft stock if he has a monster season in 2021. At least he had that opportunity until he put out this video on his Twitter account earlier today.
Thanks Coach Fleck and the rest of the Gophers staff for the unending support and guidance I have received these past few years. Coach, you are the reason that I came to Minnesota, and I would do anything to be able to play football for you again alongside my teammates and bring back a Big Ten championship to the Twin Cities. I'll be right there cheering along this program whenever Minnesota football resumes. Unfortunately, in light of the uncertainty around health and safety in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, I have to set my wishes aside from the wilderness of my family, community, and beyond. Because of this, I have decided to opt out of the 2020 college football season, and I will be taking the next steps in my journey by declaring for the 2021 NFL Draft. Minnesota will forever be a place I'm looking up to call home. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I love you all. Bateman out.
There you have it. Bateman out is how he decides to end his college football career, but he's done because of the coronavirus pandemic. Obviously, Dennis, this is a big blow to the Minnesota football program, but what's the bigger picture here?
I think the bigger picture is that there'll be a lot of other players around college football that'll be taking a look at it, and they think that they have a first-round grade, and that they may go the same way as Bateman and say, look, because of safety and health concerns, we're just going to, like, it's the same kind of thing a couple of years ago when you saw Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey not go to the bowl games, and there was a lot of controversy about that. I don't think there'll be any controversy about this. You're a first-round, you look like you're going to be a first-round draft pick, and you're staring of COVID and pandemic and uncertainty with that even before. Like, it's not a very good chance. It's less than a 50% chance. You might want to say it's less than 20% chance that they play football this year. And you may want to just protect your family, protect your status. I think it's absolutely understandable, but that's the bigger picture. There's going to be a lot of
his decision to opt out might not mean anything because if the whole season gets canceled, then everybody's opting out.
Well, I hear you on that. There's a lot of people on the other side that are like, look, this is a devil's advocate thing, but I hear it a lot. Actually, I see it a lot when it's online. It's like, look, you're not in a danger zone at all when you're a young athlete. If you're in good shape, you don't have any underlying issues. And what you talk about there is maybe a high BMI. If you're an offensive lineman, people are like, well, high BMI, or like Von Miller from the Denver Broncos. I mean, the guy looks like he's in great shape, but he had some asthma issues. He still talks about what his battle and issues that he has had, lingering issues with COVID. So we don't know what every single guy, what kind of situation that they're in, what they might have, going on there. Is everybody in the peak health and feel like they're perfect here and say, like, I can just run through it, I can battle through it? But I'm going to respect everybody's decision in this, and they don't have to say what their condition is or anything else. They can opt out, say, I get it. I do get it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see who else opts out if they end up playing a season, which neither of us think they will do, because if you look at things geographically, it seems like people in the South don't care as much about the coronavirus pandemic and they're more willing to not wear masks. They're more willing to say, hey, let's just keep on going as things have been going. You were just in the South, in Florida, a few weeks ago, and you talked about how hardly anybody was wearing a mask down there. And they tend to have a lot of really good, watchable college football teams. So it could be a situation where they might not seem to care and they'll just say, we'll just ride it through. But on the other hand, if because of the pandemic, if because people see what Rashod Bateman is doing, and because they have so many great players who are likely to be first, second, and third round picks, what if 7 Alabama players decide that they want to opt out? What if 5 or 6 Clemson players decide to opt out? Now, I'm not talking about guys that are going to be walk-ons, guys that are going to be redshirting. I'm talking about players that be starting. If you got Travis Etienne opting out, if you got Trevor Lawrence opting out, if you got quarterbacks and starting defensive ends and potential All-Americans opting out, what kind of garbage college football season are we going to have if you get these? If you get 5 and 6 and 7 star players from the best teams opting out, we could have a team like Wisconsin winning the national championship just because they're a good team that had nobody opt out.
Yeah, it could be like, somebody like Penn State. I understand all of that. I understand all of it. Like, a baseball team might only play, 43 games and have a winning percentage, and somehow they would get into a baseball playoff situation where other teams might play 60 games. I mean, that seems ridiculous. You're just talking about garbage of all these teams leaving, and maybe you only play six games on one side of like the Big Ten East, and then, you're picking 4 teams to play in a playoff. Yeah, I think everybody gets a pandemic pass when it comes down to this. I hope that we have a spot where we're sitting here in November and we're talking about, we've only played 6 games. This is ridiculous. And I would like to see all the stars play like everybody else. But if they would get games and, whatever it's going to be, well, you know what? You just try to get to the other side. And if we can have some semblance of a season and some games, we'll be arguing about it. We'll be talking about this is a sham and all the different things. But I hope we get to that point where we can talk about it, because right now, we've been sitting here. This is our 25th show. There were some very good signs a month ago, like, hey, the trajectory looks pretty good. I remember listening to Reese Davis from Game Day about a month ago, and he said if you'd asked him the week before, he was giving it a 95% chance that they were going to play college football. He was down significantly since then. And then since then, we've had, nothing but a trajectory that suggests that, if you had to put a percentage on it, it would be way below 50% now. People don't like to hear it. People think that people are rooting against it. I'm just, I just try to use my common sense and be realistic and try to tell people that, yeah, you can hope and they're going to plan. And I think that they are going to try to do this, but don't be surprised if it never gets off the ground and they don't play one game. That's realistic. I mean, you might not want to hear that. No, they're going to, there might not be, college football this year. There might not be NFL.
There aren't any Tigers games this week.
No,
just look at stuff like that.
Paul said it earlier. If you're outside a bubble here, let's just be honest, one of your teammates is a joker and wants to go out and get laid or something, or get some milk, whatever, it can end up costing you a season, costing you the entire shutdown of the sport.
Well,
what are we asking college football guys to do? Are we asking them to not mingle with the rest of the student body? We're asking them not to hang out with their girlfriends? Are we asking them not to go to class? What are we asking them to do?
I would assume that frat parties and sorority parties are going to be canceled because, obviously, at those places, number one, you're going to have large groups of people because in those frat and sorority houses, you already got 40 or 50 men or women living in the same spot. And number two, they're going to quadruple that.
Chap. I got news for you, chap. My friend was driving through Ann Arbor last week, and he said, man, there were a lot of red Solo cups all over the lawns.
Yeah, well, they're going to violate that, but you have to at least tell the players, don't do that. But here's the thing. Let's say all the Michigan players do the right thing. All the Michigan State players do the right thing, and the Penn State players are going to do the right thing. But they have a game against Maryland, and a couple of, that's fake news. You can put that up there all you want, but that's fake news. Let's say Penn State plays Maryland, and the Maryland players were out doing whatever in some big group, and they get coronavirus. And their defensive linemen are getting pancaked by the Penn State offensive line. For the other team, or on the other side of the football, close contact. Penn State could do all the right things, but if Maryland screws up, then all of a sudden, in 5 days, both teams are sitting out. Perhaps it takes even longer for Penn State's players to get positive, and they could have affected Michigan and Michigan State after that.
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying there. It's
as you get that offensive mug off the screen.
It's a difficult situation. Like, we're all looking at it. Like, there's one side where you can sit around and hope and think, yeah, man, they're going to do everything, and what player would ever want to put his team in jeopardy? But then you just start thinking a lot of the logistics, and you're like, it's a nightmare. It depends how much you think about it. Like, nobody's got answers for what's going to happen when the students come back to class. They were supposed to make the Big Ten today an announcement of whether they're going to proceed with practices on Friday. They said they were going to do it earlier in the week, and it's Tuesday at 9:15. This is getting to be now late on a Tuesday. If you get to a bunch of new cases after they had already shut some things down. I think Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, is going to be there's no way. I mean, he's going to give the go-ahead to practice this Friday. He's going to at least just pull this back for a week or two. And I think he's just going to say, look, well, we're not even hitting. We're just going through getting acclimated, and we have breakouts everywhere.
Yeah, Friday's the big day. Friday is when NCAA says that teams can start practicing. Who else is going to opt out? Is it going to be Lawrence? Is it going to be Fields? Is it going to be Micah Parsons? Is it going to be a no-namer? Is it going to be Jamar Chase?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
I'm just joking about Parsons. I don't think there's any way that Kevin Warren gives the Big Ten the okay to start practicing on Friday, considering what he's just seen from these walkthroughs. Do I think that he could say we're gonna just stay with the phase that we're in right now and wait another 2 weeks, and he can let other sports make the decision for him?
Yeah.
Like this, you got to just keep pushing this back. How far can they go? Like
to the spring.
October 26th, September
day.
26th, you could talk about that right now. You really, there's 25 practices, and it comes out to, 4 weeks. So they really could wait another 3 weeks before they really went into practice, and they could still get to that September 26th date. But, you need to turn around in this trajectory, and you need to start stacking some days and then weeks together where you feel like, hey, we're really making some progress. Because right now, it's not progress. It's,
and once again, who is to blame?
It's 2 steps backwards.
But who is to blame for all this? Me. I'm to blame. Well, no, and I get that you're joking, but I'll once again say, just like Rob Manfred isn't to blame, these Big Ten schools are not to blame. These politicians from coast to coast that refuse to do what is necessary to get us in an environment where sports is easily playable are to blame. In the KBO, they're not having teams skip an entire week of a season because they have an outbreak. In these soccer leagues in Europe, they're not having teams skip an entire week of soccer because there's an outbreak. They're playing because their coronavirus has been handled. Here in the United States of America, we had finally today the governor of Mississippi say, hey, y'all, because I want to see some college football, well, I'm going to institute a mask mandate. Wouldn't it have been nice if he had done that months ago? Wouldn't it have been nice if all 50 governors had done that along with a shutdown? If we'd had a 2-month shutdown for this country from March until May, guess what? We probably look a lot more like Canada or South Korea than we do right now.
We'll get to a lot of the feedback that's coming in the live chat on Facebook Live as well when we get into the 5th chapter in Chap's Lane game that is coming up ahead. But now it's time to get to chapter number 4, and that includes Matt Stafford. And we talk about Matt Stafford, number 9, an awful lot, even here in the 5th chapter. But today, it's not the normal, where does he rank? What kind of year is he going to have? Why can't he win a playoff game? Today, Matt Stafford, we learned, had a false positive for COVID, which is a positive, but it's also a negative. We find out from his family, his wife, Kelly, posting on Instagram just what they had to go through. And it ranged from, I'm sure Chap and others have seen it, but if you haven't, problems at school. The school saying, wait a second now, you can't be bringing your kids here. Your husband was positive. She going to the grocery store, and according to Kelly Stafford, she had somebody, saying that, hey, you're endangering everybody by being in here. She was told to wait in her car when she was picking up food. And then her friends that she is associated with, their workplaces were telling them they had to get tested before they had to go back to work. So what a nightmare from a false positive for the Staffords.
Yeah, it was certainly troublesome for them to have to go through that situation. But first of all, obviously great news for the Stafford family that it was a false positive. And because, I mean, think about this. I'm not a medical expert, but you keep on hearing that if you have a pre-existing condition, if you had some issues in your health background, that if you get the coronavirus, you could be in big trouble. We all know that Kelly Stafford, Matthew's wife, recently had a brain tumor. Less than 2 years ago, she had an operation to get rid of that brain tumor. So she's probably at higher risk. So I could understand her being really terrified about her husband contracting that virus. It's also good news because for the Lions, they don't really have a quality backup player. So they would have been in backup quarterback. So if he was going to test positive for a couple of weeks, they'd be that much further behind the eight ball. But I think this is proof that the NFL's system also works because they had the negative test, but they're testing the positive test. They test every single day. So they were able to see with 3 tests in a row that were negative after the positive that it was a fake, or not a fake, but a false positive test. I think the bigger issue is that the Lions had 8 guys on the list, and only 2, Stafford and Justin Coleman, have been cleared as far as I know. And in the even bigger picture is that the NFL is not in a bubble, just like Major League Baseball is not in a bubble. We've seen how the Marlins can go from 1 to 18 positive tests in a span of 4 or 5 days in a non-contact sport where players are socially distanced unless they're in the batter's box, running the bases, or in the dugouts. There is no social distancing on the football field unless you're the punter. But even when you're the punter, when you are on the sidelines, you're not social distancing. If somebody's running down the field, you can't social distance and tackle somebody at the same time. If there is no bubble, there is no chance.
Yeah, well, it's a much lower chance of being able to get some things done because you can do everything perfect. Like the Lions can do a deep clean 10 times like they had where you can eat off the floor at Allen Park. But if you go home and you're an offensive lineman and your kid's going to go to school in the fall and he comes up at 8 years old, runs up and says, hey, Daddy, and gives you a big hug, that's an easy way where, you're not in a bubble and you could be in trouble just like that. So I get all the concerns there. It is really an uphill battle for pro football. And they're spending $75 million. The estimate was on testing. And, we haven't heard what the price is for college football, but I did just look at the Toledo Blade yesterday that they were talking about high school football, $18,000 per game to test the players and the staff and anybody that has to do with football and, whatever, 72 hours before. So, people are like, we need to play high school football. We got to have this. And
are they doing that for other fall sports or just football?
Well, that's a good point. Like other fall sports, how could you justify doing it for football, but not like field hockey, for women's field hockey or something like that? That doesn't seem fair. So, that's going to be a huge hurdle. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be some money. Maybe the NFL will put some money in to test high schools. Maybe college will do it. I don't know.
I mean, they have enough money to do so. I don't think that they're going to do that. But, yeah, it is a mess. I was not aware of the high school thing, but I think that's something that needs to be looked at because we focus a lot of our attention on what's going on with college and pro sports because those are teams that we can all watch on TV. We all have rooting interests. It wouldn't make sense for us to do a high school sports show and one person's rooting for Catholic Central, one person's rooting for Stevenson, one person's rooting for Lance Cruz, Franklin, whatever, Country Day. I mean, we're going to have, 1,000 different schools represented. So It's understandable, but at the same time, these coaches for these teams are oftentimes 50, 60, 70 years old. They're at high risk. They might have diabetes. They might have heart issues. They might be cancer survivors, and they certainly don't want to get coronavirus from their players. It can't just be we have to play at all costs, which apparently appears to be the rationale for our nation right now, which is why we're in this situation.
All right, before we get to the fifth chapter, and that's when we will have our major wager and Chap's lame game, let's answer some of these feedback that is coming into the live chat and on Facebook Live. Paul says, put college hockey in a bubble. That's what he loves. He's also saying move high school football to spring for a season. I think what Minnesota and Colorado made that announcement today that they were punting to the spring. I think that is something that could happen. In high school football, that definitely is an option. Here's a couple on a live chat. Matt Scheller, good to see him on the live chat. He says, these athletes are going out to bars, casinos, etc. on their own time. No, they should not be playing. It's not going to work. Sports will be shut down soon. I watched the Calgary game yesterday. Not the same. Here's another question. It says, since the Tigers are not playing their series this week, how will the standings end up at the end of the season? Not sure what would happen. Would they go back and play the missed series at the end of the year?
No.
Well, they would try if they had open dates. I saw Tony Paul from the news went through and looked at the schedule to see if the Tigers and the Cardinals had some open dates. They do, but the Cardinals also have to play, I believe, the Brewers, who they missed some games with, and they don't have the open dates. So.
They played 3 games.
Yeah, they would do it on winning percentage.
Yes.
Paul, there was another question here that was asking if the players, and this is one I don't have a 100% answer on, but I remember when they were going through the negotiations that the players wanted their full pay prorated for 60 games, and that's why baseball wanted to just do 50 games because they did not want to pay that
with regards to the Matthew Stafford false positive test. This is actually a tweet from Dave Burkett, the Detroit Lions beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. And he put up this tweet earlier today. So good thing this didn't happen the Saturday before the game, huh? Definitely something the league has to get situated, but don't know how to avoid it. Now, I don't know how to avoid it either, but he brings up a great point, because what if you get to a situation where the Colts are about to play the Texans, and the Texans have a false positive on Deshaun Watson on Saturday, and then he tests negative 3 days in a row, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They would have played that game with a bogus quarterback in perhaps week 15 in a critical game to decide who's going to win the AFC South Championship. I don't know how you fix a false positive test outside of just testing all the time, and you hope that false positive comes on a Monday or a Tuesday as opposed to a Friday or a Saturday. But that something like that could also help to make the season more fraudulent.
Say it again, just like in baseball, NFL will get a pandemic pass.
I guess we'll just have to deal with the pandemic pass. Let's get to the major wager for all you sports bettors out there. Want to get some sports betting advice from us? Dennis and I have a major wager, or perhaps more than one major wager for you to take down. Dennis, what do you have for us today?
Well, my first bet, I picked the Tigers, and they ended up getting the victory last week. And so I started out with I put the 50 fictional on that one. So the next on Thursday, I came back and I split that in half, and I went with 2 overs, and I missed one and I pushed down the other. So I'm somewhere like with the juice in 23, I think 23 units left. I'm going to ride that tomorrow on the team that I'm adopting in the Eastern Conference and rooting for here in the NBA playoffs when they get there, the Toronto Raptors. We are the North. I like how Van Fleet looks. I like Spicy P, Siakam.